From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with the Wall Street Journal Potomac Watch podcast, and I'm here with Kate O'Dell and Kim Strassel. We're talking about the Senate draft bill on border security and aid to Ukraine. And let's listen to a Republican in the House, Michael McCaul, normally a sensible fellow. He's head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, talk about the bill.
I think what we wanted in the House were significant, political asylum claim reforms, like remain in Mexico. That is not in this bill. In fact, when he talks about political asylum, they take out the prosecutor, the ICE prosecutor, and the judge and allow USCIS to remove the immigrant into the United States with an ankle bracelet or work permit. I think that's going to provide a pull factor, not a push factor, outside the United States. We have a lot of questions about it. I applaud him for trying to get something done. But at the same time, I don't think this is going to be a fix.
I like Mike McCaul, Kim.
Me too.
And I think he's a force for good. But I have to say, it's the first time in history that I've ever seen an ankle bracelet described as a pull factor for any reason.
Yeah.
I think I'll enter the States so I can get into an ankle bracelet and be called upon at any minute to be hauled in by security. Not ideal, I think. The other point he makes, though, is about remain in Mexico, which, of course, was a Trump-era policy. And that's where migrants had to stay in Mexico before their asylum claims could be heard. That was ended by President Biden. There was a long legal proceeding that went to the Supreme Court on this, and the Supreme Court said that President Biden could, in fact, decide not to continue that. The negotiators said that that was something the Democrats didn't want. What do you make of the explanation for why it wasn't in the bill?
Well, for one thing, let me just point out that in some ways, this border shutdown provision, granted, it won't happen all the time, but in some ways is a bit of a remain in Mexico provision in that if the border shuts down, there's a lot of people in Mexico and they're not getting over the border as long as people keep coming. So there's an element of that. Look, I think this is a place where the Biden administration ground in its heels, in particular because of the litigation and the court fight that you mentioned. Also, let's be clear, the dynamics have changed between the two countries, and you can't just set up a Remain in Mexico program without the buy-in of the Mexican government. There were a lot of negotiations and complex diplomatic decisions that were made around that last program. And I don't think anyone wanted to sit around and hinge a congressional piece of legislation on the question of whether or not such a diplomatic deal could be done again. In some ways, Paul, in fact, in most ways, this is still a better scenario. Look, if your overall goal is to discourage people to come to the United States unless they have a very good chance of getting in, which makes more sense to you? To keep this wide open asylum process where all you have to do is claim you have the most baseline credible fear and you have a very high probability of getting in ultimately, but maybe you have to remain in Mexico for a little bit while you wait for that process to happen. Or you have a 90-day process here in the United States where it makes clear up front that your chances of getting in are very, very low unless you truly are in fear of your life. And that moreover, your entire stay beginning to end is going to happen in under a couple of months. That's going to be a greater motivation in my mind for people not to come in the first place, notwithstanding the lure of living in an ankle bracelet for a while.
And by the way, the number of people who would be in that ankle bracelet, they're very few, right? If the detention system, and we're getting additional beds, up to 50,000 beds at any one time for detention while they await asylum adjudication. It will only be if that system is overwhelmed and some other cases not very expansive. Would they have to wear that ankle bracelet and have to have a curfew where they would also have to report to wherever they were staying?
And Paul, I think it's worth noting, too, that they've also done provisions to allow for that speeding up process to actually happen in reality, meaning they're removing a bunch of this from the court system. And I think that's worth explaining as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that is very, very significant because the courts have mucked up border enforcement for a very long time. There's no question about it. Just to put a figure on this for our listeners. So if you come to the border and you claim asylum and you say, I have a credible fear of persecution back home, right now, the figure has been about 75% of those are waived into the country. For those who then return for their final asylum adjudication, whenever that is, 2 years, 4 years, right now it's upwards of 7 to 10 in some cases. only about 25% of those are found to actually have warranted asylum. So what we're having here now is a system that would essentially bring that final adjudication criteria up front so that you wouldn't have all of this long wait in the country and there will be decision made up front within 90 days whether to deport them or leave them into the country. Kate, there are some other details here that are in the bill that might be jumped on. There's the Afghan Adjustment Act as part of this for Afghans who came here after our departure from Afghanistan. That will be seized on by some. But these people, they're already here. And would regularize their process and make sure that they weren't deported back to the tender mercies of the Taliban. There's also some more legal visas each year. One illustration, not a lot, but I think it's, 50,000, Kate, for various purposes. But the one example here is that people who are here legally on so-called H-1B work visas, when their children turn 18, those children are deported, even if they're in college. So those children would be eligible for legal visas as well. Any other points you want to make about the merits here?
Well, I think one other point about the ankle bracelet discussion we were having too is that there are increased penalties for those who violate those rules. And so that also changes the dynamic. I mean, everything you're describing taken together, it really changes the underlying incentives about whether you're going to try to make a bid to come to the United States, which even if you just get 6 or 8 years working in the interior, for a lot of people is worth the effort. Now, if you're at 90 days, it just completely changes the underlying economics. So really, I think there is a streamlining here that will turn people around faster. And I think that is the most significant. But to your point about adding some extra visas, I mean, those high skill visas, you've been through trying to get them for an employee. It's just a lottery.
Yes, I have.
And every year there are far more applicants than those who win the lottery. And so it just rolls the dice. I mean, it's been clear for some time. We need thousands more of those to keep high skilled workers who are already here. I mean, keep in mind, on the right, it's always said we don't support illegal immigration, but we're okay with legal immigration. Well, these minor visa increases are also becoming a magnet for opposing the bill. So which is it? But those, I think, are important provisions of the bill, too.
Right. Well, the politics of this, Kim, are turning negative very fast. American right, Trumpians are denouncing it, many of them even before they read the thing. Mike Johnson, the Speaker, Steve Scalise, the Majority Leader, both say there's not even going to be a vote in the House on this. Chuck Schumer may move this in the Senate, try to move this week. That might be a mistake. You want to give this a chance to air out so people can't say, I'm voting against it because I haven't had a chance to read it.
But Paul, I mean, on that point, I mean, they're voting this week to open debate on the merits of the bill. It's just funny to me that folks are saying we need more time to read it, but also we completely oppose it already and we can't be persuaded.
Excellent point. So it's not a final passage vote. It's just the barrier of opening the bill to debate and consideration. But I mean, Donald Trump almost certainly will oppose this. Many Republicans will oppose it even without reading it. I mean, I think the danger here for them, Kim, is that if they do oppose this and don't even give it a vote, then what you're going to be doing is you're taking some ownership of what happens at the border for the next year. And you're giving the Democrats an argument that says, we gave you all of this opportunity. Here, President was willing to sign this, and you still won't support it. You don't really want to do anything about the border.
Yeah. Do you want to put yourself in a situation where you can have equally poor handling and approval ratings on this as the president at the moment? I mean, right now, Republicans are given higher marks by voters on who they would trust more to handle this situation. But they're essentially standing up right now, not bothering to read this bill, saying, actually, don't trust us because we care about having the political issue more. Right now, too, you have the House also maneuvering to try to reset the terms of all this, but with another standalone bill on Israel. And by the way, there is Israel money in this broader Senate bill, so they're trying to separate these out again. Of course, Mike Johnson has problems with his right yet again on that bill, which is why I agree with you, Paul. I think Chuck Schumer would be wiser to hold off on this a little bit, allow Langford to explain more, make the case, watch the House fall on its face again, which is likely to see what is going to be happening in Israel, and hope that that sharpens the stakes for everyone and understands the gravity of all of this, not just in terms of the border, but also in terms of our foreign allies and our ongoing conflicts right now.
All righty. We will leave it there. Lots more to talk about this as the story evolves. But thank you, Kate, and thank you, Kim. We're here every day with Potomac Watch, and we would love to have you here tomorrow and the rest of the week. Thanks for listening.